On July 13th, 2024, there was an attempt on the former president's life at one of his rallies in Pennsylvania.
I think probably over here is good.
Pulitzer Prize winning photographer Doug Mills captured an amazing image of a bullet midair.
Yeah, I still got a connection. 3, 2, 1. Nice.
Shut up.
I got
In
it.
this video, I try to do the same. What is going on, everybody? It is Jamil with Millman Studios. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to another video. Before we begin, I want to thank you guys so much for your engagement and support on my previous video regarding this topic with Doug Mills and his photojournalism. If you haven't seen that video, be sure to check it out. So the purpose of today's video is to see if we could create that image that Doug Mills got where you see the bullet midair only inches away from the president in a controlled setting. So for this test, I used the Canon R3 with the 85mm f1.2 DS. Wonderful camera, beautiful camera. As you know, a little bit different than what Doug Mills was using on the day of the event. He was using a Sony 24mm f1.4 and he was shooting at 1.6. The reason I decided to shoot with the 85-1.2 is because it's the fastest lens that I have, and I really wanted to use the same settings and to expose similar to Doug in that image, which was 1/8,000th of a second, f1.6, and we don't know the ISO data, but I would imagine on a bright sunny day it was probably down to the base ISO. Because out here in Alberta we do have a lot of smoke from forest fires in BC, the sunlight was restricted slightly, so I ended up going to about 800 to 1000 ISO.
We have remote shooting on the Canon app. We're manual focused, and my settings are 1/8,000th of a second, f1.6, and to maintain exposure I have it at 800 ISO. For shutter speed and aperture, we have the exact settings as Doug Mills. We're gonna see if we can capture this shot.
We use two different shooting speeds. We use 30 frames a second, and we also use 195 frames a second for 50 images. So just for context, in order to shoot 50 images at a frame rate of 195 shots per second, that only takes 0.26 seconds to do. And it's not that I can continuously shoot at that rate because those images have to buffer. So when you press the shutter at 195 shots per second, it takes 0.26 seconds to capture those images, and it takes another maybe 5 seconds to buffer those 50 images. So those are some of the limitations. As you will see, timing is going to be very important in this test, and it was difficult.
No dice! My timing was off. No. One more time.
Because we have 0.26 seconds to capture a speeding bullet going at about 3,200 feet per second for one of the rounds. We'll get into what we shot in a second. And another was maybe about 2,500 feet per second, a heavier round, which is a bit easier to capture, but still difficult.
2, 1. Perfect. One more. 3, 2, 1. Nice. All good? So it's not a 2.23. This is a 44, so it's a slower round, but we're just testing it out.
Okay, so we know that the shooter was about 150 yards from the former president. In this test, we were shooting at about 60 yards away from the target. So it'll be negligible for how fast the bullet takes to exit the muzzle and hit the target from 60 to 150. There will be a difference, but like I said, it'll be negligible.
Yeah, the 2.23, we should have it, like in the image, it should look like,
Yeah, I bet.
yeah. So
With that, yeah, that 22-inch barrel, I mean, I could go farther away.
okay, sure. Right now, what are you at? About 100,
Oh, like 55.
55?
60 yards.
So 150 would be like by that tree line.
And then also a challenge that we faced was the plane of focus at f1.6 is pretty razor thin. So we did capture some bullets, but they were pretty well out of focus, as they would be at that speed, but making sure that you're on the same plane of focus with the bullet, that was hard to achieve, and those mosquitoes were eating me. So okay, so let's get into the firearms and the ammo. So for the 223, we used a Savage Model 11, and then for the 44 Magnum, we used a
Quick sponsorship.
check out From the Periphery mugs, www.millimanstudios. So for the 223 caliber, we use a Savage Model 11, and then for the 44 Magnum, we use light loads of 44 Magnum, and we shot through a Rossi Model 11. Okay, so let's get into the images that I captured. The first image was shot at 30 frames per second. It was kind of our tester, and we used the light loads of the 44 Magnum, which means that they travel a bit slower, so in theory it should have been easier to catch. It was still challenging, but we did capture this image. So slightly out of focus, but we still do have that round, which is moving fairly slow, relatively speaking. And it's not like a long streak that you got in Doug Mills's photo with the 223 round. It's like I said, a slower round. So capturing it, it's going to be a little slower, like look like that big in the picture.
Did it make it on the paper?
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, there it is.
Really?
After a few attempts shooting at 30 frames per second with the slower round, we decided to upgrade to the faster round, the 223, which was traveling at about 3,200 feet per second. This was going to be in line with what the actual shooter fired at the event. So to boost our confidence in hopes of getting an image early on, we shot this 223 round through the Canon R3. Well, we didn't shoot the round through the Canon R3. It's just a camera after all. So we shot the 223 to the Savage 11. That's at 3,200 feet per second. And for the Canon R3, our capture settings were very high speed at 195 frames per second in 50 image increments. So as I said before, 0.26 seconds is the margin of error. When I hear that gun go off, I'm immediately hitting that shutter. We tried to count down to kind of calibrate, but still it was challenging. This was actually an image that I didn't even know that I got. Looking through this screen, you know, to see a flying bullet, it's easy to miss, and I did miss it, which takes us to the third shot. Now, I thought that I captured the bullet kind of tumbling through the air, when really, when I looked through the pictures on my computer, it was actually a fly in the top left corner of the screen. So that was embarrassing. But the actual image of the 223 that I captured, I didn't even know that I got it at the time. So that was pretty funny. So looking at the image of the 223 that was captured by accident, on the left side of the screen, you're going to see the bullet. Now this is traveling at 3,200 feet per second. But it's also important to know that the camera is shooting at a very high frame rate. So if we did capture, and luckily we did, you're going to see that the bullet is actually not stretched out as it was in Doug Mill's photo, because the frame rate is that much faster. Now, if we capture that bullet at 30 frames per second, then you're gonna see that it's actually stretched out because we're shooting slower. Think of an image that you shoot at a slow shutter speed. Just say you have someone running in front of the camera at a slow shutter speed. The slower the shutter speed, the more stretched out that person is gonna look, and they're gonna look more ethereal.
This is gonna be a way faster shot. So chances to miss exponentially increase. But we're going to try to mimic the Trump shot, 30 frames a second, 1/8,000th of a second, f1.6.
So fun fact, we only had 4 rounds of 223. We forgot to grab a handful of 223 ammo, so we only had 4 chances. And on the last one,
I got it.
Shut up.
I got it. Yep, I got it. Call me Doug Mills from now on.
we actually got the 223 at 30 frames per second. Now, because the plane of focus is so thin at f1.6, it's a little hard to see, but you can see how stretched out it is. And I was super happy about this image. So there's been a lot of questions about Doug's exposure settings, shooting at 1/8,000th of a second, f1.6. We don't know the ISO, but like I said, because it was a bright sunny day, I think it was base ISO. And a lot of people are saying, well, he must have known. If he's shooting at 1/8,000th of a second, Doug, that guy knew. So in my opinion, after being out there with my camera and mimicking his settings the best that I could, I do think it's plausible that he would have those settings without knowing about what was coming. No, but in all honesty, I do think that it is plausible, because the only difference that I had when exposing was that I had to increase my ISO to about 800 to 1000. And the reason that was because I was shooting later than 6 p.m. in the evening, and we have that smoke coverage to restrict the sun. But if the sun was given free rein and there was no cloud coverage, it was a bright, harsh, sunny day, and I was shooting wide open, I would be forced to shoot at about 1/8,000th of a second, especially if I'm not using a filter of any kind. And that's what makes this image that much more impressive, because he's shooting at 1.6. The plane of focus is pretty thin at 1.6, so for him to capture that bullet whizzing by the former president's head, that is a tough shot, and that is super impressive to do in the moment. So even in a controlled environment, that is a very challenging shot. And for Doug to do that in real time, I'm gonna say the guy was lucky. Obviously he has years of skills and experience, but he was there, and that is the first thing. And he was holding down that shutter for dear life at 30 frames per second, and he captured it. It was hard to do in a control setting. We shot about 12 to 15 images, and I was able to pick out 3 that I captured. So yeah, very impressive shot. I say all of that to say this: Sony did it, Canon can do it too, so Nikon, you're up. Guys, thanks so much for tuning into this video. Remember, the best gear is the gear you have, and the best photos are the ones you take. Don't forget to keep on shooting.